the registration of guns? Do you still favor the licensing of guns? And in 1996, your campaign issued a questionnaire, and your writing was on the questionnaire that said you favored a ban on handguns.
No, my writing wasn't on that particular questionnaire, Charlie. As I said, I have never favored all-out ban on handguns. What I think we can provide is common sense approaches to the issue of illegal guns that are ending up on the streets. We can make sure that criminals don't have guns in their hands. We can make certain that those who are mentally deranged are not getting hold of handguns. We can trace guns that have been used in crimes to unscrupulous gun dealers that may be selling to straw purchasers and dumping them on the streets. The point is that what we have to do is get beyond the politics of this issue and figure out what in fact is working. Look, in my hometown of Chicago, on the south side of Chicago, we've had 34 gun deaths last year of Chicago public school children. And I think that most law-abiding gun owners all across America would recognize that it is perfectly appropriate for local communities and states and the federal government to try to figure out how do we stop that kind of killing.
Senator Clinton, you have a home in D.C. Do you support the D.C. ban?
You know, George, I want to give local communities the opportunity to have some authority over determining how to keep their citizens safe. This case you're referring to before the Supreme Court is apparently dividing the Bush administration. You know, the Bush administration basically said, we don't have enough facts to know whether or not it is appropriate. And Vice President Cheney, who you know is a fourth special branch of government all unto himself, has actually filed a brief saying, oh no, we have to, we have to prevent D.C. from doing this.
But what do you think? Do you support it or not?
What I support is sensible regulation that is consistent with the constitutional right to own and bear arms.
Is the D.C. ban consistent with that right?
I think a total ban with no exceptions under any circumstances might be found by the court not to be. But I don't know the facts. But I don't think that should blow open a hole that says that D.C. or Philadelphia or anybody else cannot come up with sensible regulations to protect their people and keep, machine guns and assault weapons out of the hands of folks who shouldn't have them.
Well, with all due respect, I'm not sure I got an answer from Senator Obama, but do you still favor licensing and registration of handguns?
What I favor is what works in New York. We have a set of rules in New York City, and we have a totally different set of rules in the rest of the state. What might work in New York City is certainly not going to work in Montana. So for the federal government to be having any kind of, blanket rules that they're going to try to impose, I think doesn't make sense.
But Senator, you were for that when you ran for Senate in New York.
I was for the New York rules. That's right. I was for the New York rules because they have worked over time. And there isn't a lot of uproar in New York about changing them because I go to upstate New York where we have a lot of hunters and people who are collectors and people who are sports shooters. They have every reason to believe that their rights are being respected. You walk down the street with a police officer in Manhattan, he wants to be sure that there is some way of protecting him and protecting the people that are in his charge.
Senator Obama, last May we talked about affirmative action, and you said at the time that affluent African Americans like your daughters should probably be treated as pretty advantaged when they apply to college, and that poor white kids should get special consideration, affirmative action. So as president, how specifically would you recommend changing affirmative action policies so that affluent African Americans are not given advantages and poor, less affluent whites are?
Well, I think that the basic principle that should guide discussions not just of affirmative action, but how we are admitting young people to college generally, is how do we make sure that we're providing ladders of opportunity for people? How do we make sure that every child in America has a decent shot in pursuing their dreams? And race is still a factor in our society, and I think that for universities and other institutions to say, we're going to take into account the hardships that somebody has experienced because they're black or Latino or
even
because they're a woman.
Wealthy.
I think that's something that they can take into account, but it can only be in the context of looking at the whole situation of the young person. So if they look at my child and they say, Malia and Sasha, they've had a pretty good deal, then that shouldn't be factored in. On the other hand, if there's a young white person who has been working hard, struggling, and has overcome great odds, that's something that should be taken into account. So I still believe in affirmative action as a means of overcoming both historic and potentially current discrimination. But I think that it can't be a quota system, and it can't be something that is simply applied without looking at the whole person, whether that person is black or white or Hispanic, male or female. What we want to do is make sure that people who've been locked out of opportunity are going to be able to walk through those doors of opportunity in the future.
Senator Clinton, would you agree to that kind of change?
Well, here's the way I'd prefer to think about it. I think we've got to have affirmative action generally to try to give more opportunities to young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, whoever they are. That's why I'm a strong supporter of early childhood education and universal pre-kindergarten. That's why I'm against No Child Left Behind as it is currently operating, and I would end it because we can do so much better to have an education system that really focuses in on kids who need extra help. That's why I'm in favor of much more college aid, not these outrageous predatory student loan rates that are charging people I've met across Pennsylvania 20, 25, 28% interest rates. Let's make college affordable again. See, I think we have to look at what we're trying to achieve here somewhat differently. We do have a real gap. We have a gap in achievement, we have a gap in income, but we don't have a potential gap. I think our job should be to try to create the conditions that enable people to live up to their God-given potential. And that means health care for everyone, no exceptions, nobody left out. And it means taking a hard look at what we need to do to compete and win in the global economy. So that's how I prefer to think about it. You know, let's affirmatively invest in our young people and make it possible for them to have a good middle-class life in today's much more competitive economy.
We're running short on time. Let me just give some quick questions here, and let me give you a minute each to answer. What are you going to do about gas prices? It's getting to $4 a gallon. It is killing truckers.
That's
People
right.
are in trouble. And yet the whole world pays a whole lot more for gas than we do. What are you going to do about it?
I met with a group of truckers in Harrisburg about a week and a half ago, and here's what I told them. Number one, we are going to investigate these gas prices. The federal government has certain tools that this administration will not use in the Federal Trade Commission and other ways through the Justice Department, because I believe there is market manipulation going on, particularly among energy traders. We've seen this movie before in Enron, and we've got to get to the bottom to make sure we're not being taken advantage of. Number two, I would quit putting oil into the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and I would release some to help drive the price down globally. And thirdly, if there is any kind of gas tax moratorium, as some people are now proposing.
Like John McCain.
Like John McCain and some Democrats, frankly. I think Senator Menendez and others have said that we may have to do something, because when you get to $4 a gallon gas, people are not going to be able to afford to drive to work. And what I would like to see us do is to say, if we have that, then we should have a windfall profits tax on these outrageous profits of the oil companies, and put that money back into the Highway Trust Fund so that we don't lose out on repair and construction and rebuilding. But ultimately, Charlie, we've got to have a long-term energy strategy. We are so much more dependent on foreign oil today than we were on 9/11. And that is a real indictment of our leadership. And I've laid out a comprehensive plan to move us toward energy independence that I hope I will have the opportunity to implement as president.
Very quickly, Senator Obama, same thing, but we've heard from politicians for a long time. We're going to end dependence on foreign oil. I just have a quote: the generation-long growth in our dependence on foreign oil will be stopped dead in its tracks right now. That was Jimmy Carter in 1979, and it's gotten a whole lot worse since then.
Well, you're right, and that's why people are cynical, because decade after decade we talk about energy policy, or we talk about healthcare policy, and through Democratic and Republican administrations, nothing gets done. Now, I think many of the steps that Senator Clinton outlined are similar to the plans that we've talked about. It is absolutely true that we've got to investigate potential price gouging or market manipulation. I have strongly called for a windfall profits tax that can provide both consumers relief and also invest in renewable energies. I think that long-term we're going to have to raise fuel efficiency standards on cars, because the only way that we're going to be able to reduce gas prices is if we reduce demand. You've still got 1 billion people in China and maybe 700 million in India who still want cars. And so the long-term trajectory is that we're going to have to get serious about increasing our fuel efficiency standards and investing in new technologies.